Are you creatively stuck and unsure how to get better at cinematography? Have you ever wondered, why am I not getting the same results as others using the same gear? Are you struggling with getting consistent results that will ultimately help you land those big jobs you dream of? I was there too, but today I'm gonna give you practical tips that's gonna help you fix that. It's gonna be a long one, so mount up, you're going for a ride. Now let's go get better.
Mount up.
What's going on, guys? My name is D Mount and I'm a commercial cinematographer based here in Tampa, Florida. And I've had the opportunity of working with brands like Puma, Harper's Bazaar, NVIDIA, Corvette, and more. And today I'm gonna give you some tips that I can guarantee will change the way you create images. You will 100% get better at cinematography from watching this entire video. But first, let me tell you about something that I absolutely got wrong. Many of you know, if you've been following my channel, that I used to play in the NFL. And with that, I spent a ton of money on getting the best gear and lenses and bought the best courses. And honestly, having all of that really held me back in my career because somehow I jumped the basics and relied on the technology to get me the results. I remember buying my first cinema camera, the Ursa Mini 4.6K, and shooting for this physical therapy clinic in Denver. And it was absolutely terrible. They weren't satisfied with the videos I made. And I not only never worked for them again, I never worked for anyone in that industry in Denver ever again. Word spreads fast when you do bad work. And all I can say is I'm happy I moved to Tampa. In this video, I'm going to unpack all the things I wish I knew earlier. But before we get into those 5 tips, I want to give you a sort of philosophical tip that is arguably the most important. You as a cinematographer have to find what looks good and only surround yourself looking at that on a daily basis. Here's what I mean. I love Instagram. It's where I get most of my work from. It's where I communicate with my friends and send memes. It's where I consume the most content other than YouTube throughout the day. With that being said, if you spend all day looking at bad looking content and memes, then when it comes time for you to create content, you will subconsciously create the content you consume. I'm willing to bet money that if you go to your favorite cinematographer's explore page, it will be nothing other than high quality stills, inspirational content, and all centered around shooting beautiful imagery. So before we go into that first tip, let me show you how I cleaned up my Instagram feed. You go right over to your explore page. Notice how I have all of these really random videos. Yeah, guys, I'm guilty of it too. But notice that, videos of people fighting and whatever the bad short form content we're seeing. But if you hold on the screen, notice how you can see a not interested button here. And if you do that enough throughout the week, eventually it's gonna push you the content that you wanna see. You just have to kind of stay up to date on it. Super simple, right? Know what look you wanna get before you go on set. Early on in my career as a cinematographer, I used to show up on set with absolutely no idea on how I wanted the shoot to look like. I had a storyboard, shot list. All I cared about was getting my coverage, getting paid, and going home. It wasn't until I started using resources like FrameSet, Shot Deck, AdForm that not only gave me inspirations and aspirations, it also gave me images that I can practice achieving. This was because if I failed, I'd know immediately where that failing point was. And if I got close, I knew the client would be happy because I gave them something that we were going for before the shoot. FrameSet is great for music videos and commercials. Shot Deck is perfect for films. And if you're trying to break into the commercial world, AdForm's Top 5 and Eye Candy is insane for inspiration. Definitely go check those out if you're trying to be a commercial director or a cinematographer. These next 2 tips are kind of in the same world, but are equally important to one another. I'm reluctant to even suggest this because I know exactly how I felt when someone told me this. Have you ever gotten back from shooting and you look at your footage and you just jump out of your seat in excitement? You're like, oh my God, this footage is crazy. You give it to your client and they love it. And you're on top of the world. Months later, they want to hire you again for another project. And after shooting, you take the footage home and you look at it and you realize, why isn't this footage as good I did everything exactly the same as I did last time, but the question is, did you? And if yes, how do you know if you did? See what I'm getting at here? All this to say, get a light meter. I know you guys are saying, yeah, those things are old. I have false color. We all have the same tools, but nothing beats having a light meter to use as a tool for not only learning your craft and creating consistency, but learning how to speak the same language as the crew you brought on. This is what's gonna keep you working fast on set, because now instead of saying, hey, can you bring that key light down a bit? It's bring that key light down half a stop and go up 2 stops on the hair light. All right, now let's knock that background down 1 stop below the fill. Speaking of fill, that's a perfect segue into tip number 3. Know and understand your contrast ratios. There is a numerical system that every great cinematographer uses that you can easily implement inside of your own work and get very similar results. Your contrast ratios tell the story and paint the picture for your audience, and it is up to you to find out what will be your go-to look. 1:1, that's great for infomercials. 2:1, that's great for romance and comedy. 4:1 is great for drama, and so on. Learn these, because now that you have your light meter, you can light for these ratios, and when something doesn't work, you can know directly what it is. Say you're out shooting a dramatic interview. It's so contrasty that your subject gets lost. Now you have an answer. Maybe the next time you put your fill at 2 stops below instead of 3 stops below. Now for your next shoot, that's gonna make you faster. The point I'm trying to get at is, these are all measurable and practical things that you can do to get you better and faster at your craft, but it takes practice. What I would suggest is going to frameset.io, pulling the stills into Resolve, and turning on false color, and take screenshots of the ratios, and then go for those ratios on the next shoot. Let me know if you guys want a tutorial on how to use and read a light meter, and I got you. So I grew up in an era where film lights were big, heavy, and hot. I mean, you couldn't have them next to your subject without melting them, right? And some of them were too loud to have anywhere close to set. Now we are spoiled. We live in an era where now you can have bicolored and sometimes full RGB WW lights that are right next to your subject with beautiful soft light, and it's quiet. You can't ask for anything more than that. But since we are in this era, with great power comes great responsibility, and most people don't honor that responsibility. So now most people don't know how to or where to put LED light fixtures to get the best results. We just know how to shoot on the shadow side, which everybody knows that. And this leads me to tip number 4. Spend time learning your key lights and get to know your diffusion fabrics that's giving you the look that you are gravitating to. Know if you place your light, your key light, 45 degrees from your subject to get Rembrandt lighting, what would that say to your audience? If you decide to place your key light 90 degrees of your subject and give them split lighting, what would that say to your audience? What fabric will you use to accomplish this? Okay, now how big is a fixture? How big is a frame? What lighting fixture? See, all of this can get overwhelming, but I'm gonna give you some tips and some rules that I like to live by personally, and maybe that's be enough to get you started. For my interiors, I like using half grid for my key light, and for my hard lighting source, or for anything dramatic that needs contrast, I use a hard lighting source. And for my commercials, I like to use panel lights like the Nova. Just make sure I box it in using 4x4 floppies. And for my day exteriors, I like to use half soft frost and ultra bounce as fill. I never light a face with any frame smaller than a 6x6. And for my night interiors, I light with practicals. And I bounce a hard light source into unbleached muslin. But understand this, the bigger the light, the more it'll wrap, and the placement of your light tells a story. Let me give you an example of this very thing. From my most recent Star Wars film, I knew I wanted to sidelight the villain to make him unattractive and evil. Backlight my lead to make him mysterious and hidden. And Rembrandt his mother so you can feel her distress. And even though the audience didn't know that I was doing this, they felt it. Here is the most important tip that gave me the most improvements in my work as a cinematographer. Have you ever wondered, how in the heck can Batman be shot this dark? Or why can't I see anything in Game of Thrones? Have you ever thought to yourself, man, whenever I go for a dark and moody look, I just end up getting a noisy image that looks terrible? The answer to your problem is you aren't using your biggest, softest, lightest light as your ambient light. Your ambient and room tone should be the last thing on your triangle of light that you use to pick up the shadows and unify your image. We often forget about using this because our entire lives we've heard of 3-point lighting system, but that system is outdated, especially now since we have powerful LED lights that are capable of wrapping so much light nowadays that you most likely have to bring in negative field to soak up the wrap. Now that we have these powerful LED lights that we use as key lights, we are getting sourcey images that leaves our images feeling unnaturally lit. Lights like the Amaran F22 from Aputure is perfect, but better companies like Godox and Intelitech are making a splash too. We even have companies like Aputure and CRLS innovating new ways to do this setup much easier. These lights are arguably the most important outside of your key, and honestly, you can even use these lights for your far side key work for your wides. They are just all around workhorse, and I highly recommend spending the time to use one. I know a lot of you already know this already, but what really kind of stumped me early on in my career was, how are these people rigging these lights up? There isn't much on the internet on what grip gear people are using to get these lights above our subjects. So I'm gonna give you 3 known ways that I found that people are doing this. The most expensive way is with the Mini Max boom arm or the Max Menace boom arm. This is probably the quickest and safest, but the weight is limited. The most common way is a boom arm and some speed rails. This takes the longest to set up, but you can get some heavier, more powerful lights and boom them out further using this way. I'll post a link down below on the perfect video on how to do this, and for cheap too. And then you have what I've been using that's been working perfectly for us. It's called a Koo Junior boom stand. I like this because it's not too heavy, it's solo shooter friendly, and really easy to use. It fits right in my car. Yeah, I can take it anywhere. Before you do any of these rig contraptions, make sure you test it before you take it on set and actually rig something above your subject's head.
The girl them skill arty. Thunderball, some give it to, some give it to, some give it to our girls. 5 million and 40 naughty shorty. Baby girl, all my girls, all my girls. Thunderball say, well, I'm on the way, the time cold.
Everyone who made it this far, I wanted to leave you guys with the bonus tip. When I used to shoot for production companies, I used to just hand my footage off and wouldn't see what it would look like until months after it was delivered. And sometimes I would see the footage and it would come out horrible. And it's absolutely no one's fault but yours. It wasn't until I started asking for the footage and putting it inside of post and seeing how I was exposing and evaluating myself shoot after shoot after shoot till I started making a huge jump in the quality of what I was shooting. I realized really quickly that if you pull your footage in post and you have to make all of these huge adjustments, then something on set that you did was bad and it needs to be corrected. Now that you see what you did, you can get better and know the things that you can get away with next time to save time on set. You should really only be making small adjustments to get where you want to go, and that takes a huge understanding on how the process of color grading works. How easy would it be to just tell your colorist, hey man, I meant to have this background 1 shot under. Can you use a power window to like bring that down for me? Do you see how fast and clear you can direct to get the results that you want? This will only lead to like more jobs. And you know who the colorists talk to the most? Directors and producers. You see where I'm going with this? The bonus tip is learn the process of color grading. If you're struggling finding the right places to learn color grading, follow this playlist on my channel. It'll take you from point A to point B, but start with this banging video on how to fix dark videos. That's it for now. Go forth and create, but don't forget to stay resilient and mount up.
Keep keeping you warm. I got the right temperature for shelter you from the storm.